Hello, everybody. Gustav is moving like this, like this. Welcome to another episode of Embodying the Logos. We're gonna take off where we left off with going to these. What is it? Not Aramaic. It's Cyrillic. Syriac. No,
Syriac.
Syriac. Oh, that was, I got it. I got it. Like I'm impressed by myself. This is a good start. So yeah, take us away.
Okay. So the first word today is sort of like where we're leaving off from last time. Just jumping off a very deep word, and this is Adam, right? Which is the name of the first man. It's also the word for like all mankind, and it has to do with. So in the Bible, it says that Adam was called that because he was taken from the earth.
Mhm.
And I did some looking into this, and in Genesis, so when you think of Earth in Genesis, where Adam was taken from, you normally think of God created the heavens and the earth, but
Mhm.
there's actually two different kinds of Earths. There's Earth, which is the earth that God creates in the beginning, and the word for that in Hebrew is Aretz. So God Bereshit bara Elohim um, Shmaim va Haaretz, which means the heavens and the earth. So Aretz is sort of like the earth, but Adamah means like soil.
Yeah, I heard clay as well. Like,
Yeah. It's I think it's a little bit ambiguous, but it doesn't mean earth. It means like perhaps the fertile part of the earth, something like that.
well. So
This,
when I'm looking at this, right, like I immediately see a problem because when I hear earth, right, like I hear feminine, like Gaia, um, matter, right, like matrix, like the potential from which things come, which is maybe the first earth that you're talking about. Um, but yeah, like Adam is man, right, and man is intermediary. Uh, they're priests, they're bridges. Um, so when we see like a form, right? There's it's interesting that archetype is not in heaven, right? Like that's a weird. But 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 you can see how that which is eternal from heaven molds what is below, right? By being embodied, right? So I think that's what it's referencing to.
yeah, yeah. I've some more thoughts on that. So when I think of soil, I think of it's sort of like this life-giving part of the earth, because at
Mm.
least in the Middle East, so much of the earth is either mountains or desert, or for some other reason it's just not it's not life-giving. It's not fertile.
Yeah,
And
it's where you plant the seeds.
yeah, and there's this interesting sort of when we think uh I don't know, I don't want to say scientifically, but it's something like ecologically, then we sometimes think in order of precedence of like abiotic factors and biotic factors, and then the abiotic factors are things like latitude, so like sunlight and mountains, things like that. But there's actually this. I'm not sure that's the best way to think about it, because in some way the environment is sort of synonymous with the ecosystem you find there. So if you find a forest
It's
there,
like climate, right? Like the environment is the climate.
yeah, but like when you think of soil, soil implies that there's already an ecosystem there, because to have soil, you need like the
Mm.
plants form the soil, and the soil lets the plants be there. But it's also synonymous with there being rain or a river, so there's like if there's soil, there's definitely some source of water there sometimes.
Right.
And
So
like all of
that
these things
connects to
kind of come
blood,
together.
right. Like if you look at soil as vegetation feeding itself or something, right? It's like the blood is also that which holds the tradition, right? The family, the union over time, right? So in some sense, it's a vessel of life. Both of these, like they hold life, which is what man also does.
So Adam also has some other connections. So there's the verb for resembling something or imitating something. So you might say that an image resembles the original thing that it's an image of. And for me, that obviously connects to man being made in the image of God. Uh, and yeah, and there's also blood. So you kind of mentioned blood. I'm not sure what to do with that exactly, but it's there.
Well, blood as opposed to, right? As opposed to what? Like spirit? Like like when we look at the archetype, right, or figure, right, or form, right? Like I'm thinking of Platonic form, right? And a form is something that you relate to, but it's yeah, I've been struggling with Platonism and how they're doing that and how to think about the Platonic realm, but I and Mark have been having a lot of issues with the word form because it has this material connotation, right? And you could say that an idea takes form when it meets thought, right? And we can't relate to the idea directly apart from it informing us.
Because it needs constraint, right?
Yeah, it needs a body, right? Like yeah, like
Yep.
which is yeah, like yeah, and so well, I was reading Genesis as a consequence of our last talk, and I noticed that there was distinct heavens in Genesis, and which is not really um, present when you just read it because it just says heaven twice. But uh, what that means is that there's a layer, right? Like there's a spiritual heaven, and then there's a physical heaven, which is the image of the spiritual heaven, right? So you could say that man, in some sense, is an image of the earthly. Like it's a step up, like it's a step closer to heaven. So I think what was this Mathieu Peugeot? He has this cycle where you like like from Earth you graze, right, or whatever, right? Like you gather and you get meat, right, which is refined, and then you put it on the fire, you cook it, right, you offer it, and then it becomes smoke, right, which ascends to heaven, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
like a communication up, like it's well, it's pleasing God. Um, so there's a drawing, but you can also see that there's like a transformation, right? Where like first of all, like what is flesh? Well, flesh is like really condensed, right? Like it's gathered into one telos, one purpose, right? Like in a body, and then it becomes smoke, and I'm like a little bit, yeah, iffy on the smoke, but well, yeah, well, it's a spirit that comes out of it, right? Like like the flesh holds something that returns to heaven, right? Like it worships heaven in some sense.
Mhm.
And then you have the other side, and I think that's where, like, heaven plants seeds, right? So it impregnates uh, the earth, and then that grows into bread or something, right? Like the seed grows into bread, and then we consume the bread, right? Like, so there's um, a way in which the word, right? The we consume that which is heavenly, so that we can become a vessel, right? Like we can give it proper expression by making it part of it, right? But like it's important not to forget the digestive process that is happening when we eat bread, right? So because the bread changes form, right? Like it disintegrates and it gets reintegrated in the body at the places where it has to provide energy effectively, right? So if we take that to a spiritual level, it's like, okay, we have a principle, and then it gets fractalized, right? Like put in a fractal, and then it gets called upon when we have to enact it. So, and I think blood is maybe the life-giving principle that you adhere to.
Well, blood is also it has to do with like tradition and with generation, because people at least used to say that when two bodies unite in sex, they become one blood.
Mm-hmm.
And a child is sort of the unity of two different bloodlines coming together.
Right,
And
and
people say
and
that,
and literally the unity of two physical bodies, right? Yeah.
yeah, yep, and it's sort of this, even though maybe you're not, so people would say flesh from my flesh, and maybe blood from my blood, but like I wouldn't say that me and my brother are one flesh. I would say we're one blood. So there's like
You
a
you can be
unity
one
of
flesh, though.
principle, but maybe not of like embodiment. Like a
Yeah, but you
unity of
can be
principle
of
in some
one
sense.
flesh because you're part of the same body. You're part of the family, right? Like it's just like, how do you embody that family? Because like if you would go to war, like you would be of one flesh.
I think I think what I'm trying to express is that I see blood as a like a higher unifying principle than the flesh. That the blood is that which unifies the flesh.
Yeah, and yeah, no, I agree, right? So what is the flesh? Well, like the flesh is that which deals with earth, right? Right, with the earthly. So like if we share food, right? Like that's not because we share blood, right? Like we share the constraints of the flesh, like physical food, I mean.
Hmm.
And like if we share a room, right, to sleep, like we're also dealing with the constraints of the flesh in some sense, right? And you don't have to be of one blood to do that, but like what is the thing that binds you, right? Like now you get into iffy territory, right? Like can you trust the other, right? Like the binding of the flesh is like, I'm actually having a Twitter spat about this. It's like, because basically what was insinuated is that after eating the fruit, right, like we're in a fallen world and that's satanic. And it's like, no, it's not satanic. It's of the flesh, right? And in the flesh, there's goodness because else it wouldn't work. but it's not sufficient. That's why we need to be reborn in the spirit.
Okay. I I don't know what's going on Twitter. I would need to see that for reference.
um, yeah, so because like I'm going with my eyes to the shedding of blood. Well, I guess this is in relation to
I think it just has to do
sacrifice.
with blood. It's like blood bleeding. It doesn't necessarily imply that you're losing blood. It's just kind of the verb associated with the word, I think.
Yeah, but there's two sheddings of blood, right? Like there's one that Cain did to Abel, and then there's the other that the high priest does in the Holy of Holies.
Hmm. Oh yeah, that's true. And in both cases, the blood ends up on the ground, I think.
No. The one he sprinkles it on the altar.
Yeah, he does. But I think the rest ends up on the ground or something like that. I don't know. I should know.
Mm. Anyway, like because I think it's related to the Holy of Holies, the blood on the Holy of Holies, right? And that because that's a ritual of imitation, right? And I don't think that murder qualifies for that. Anyway,
No, maybe let's move on. I think we
yeah,
have plenty
let's
to talk
let's
about.
leave it up for comments in the comment section.
Hopefully, hopefully. All right. So this is a big word. It has a lot of stuff in it. Uh, and so the main meaning, the one that is most common, has to do with revelation, with something being revealed, mainly with God revealing something to people. So a lot of these words are something being unrolled, or yeah, a revelation or something like that. But there's some interesting ones. So it also has to do with waves. So waves in the sea, big ones. So waves in the water. It also has to do with exile, with being carried away into exile.
Yeah,
And
I'm already in Jonah at this point.
oh yeah, huh, yeah. So there's a lot of words in here: veil, laying open, cloak, curtain rod, parchment, spherical, round. Lots of words, but I'm not sure how to connect them. I'm not sure if they're like all connected, but Jonah, I think is a good starting point. Yeah, that's a really good point. What thoughts do you
So
have, Manuel?
I have my notes and you've updated your slides. So my notes are from the past, and I had the word expression and product written down.
Hmm.
Right? Because what is a wave? Well, it's like an expression of the spirit. Like it's
Mm.
actually a physical body of the spirit moving. Um,
So how would that be different from a river or like a beam of light?
well, a beam of light is ineffable, right? Like a wave isn't. Also, a beam of light has a kind of different relationship to time, right? So a river would be a constant flow, which is nourishing. A wave is something that clashes on the beach and drags things with it, and it brings things with it as well, right? So it's erosion more, right? Like it's and then if you would stand in the sea, it's also a real like intense experience if it bumps onto you. And then if you're on a boat in a wave, right? Like that's destabilization, right? Like that's um, announcing the, well, not the flood, but the falling in the water, right? Like, to go back to Jonah, like, I'm also thinking of Peter walking on the water, right? It's like it has to do with faith, right? And the ability to be in faith, and like why did they throw Jonah overboard? Well, because they need to tame the waters, right? So what's happening with Jonah? He's upsetting the order, right? Like, he's not letting happen what is supposed to happen. And because what's not happening, nature snaps back in a profound way, right? It's like um, you're postponing judgment in some sense, right? Like, and well, we can see it in the modern world, right? Like people are not following God, right? And like we just strain the goodness that we've inherited. We keep straining it, we keep straining it, we keep straining it until like it snaps, right? And so, like, what do we see? Well, we see ripples. Like, we use the word ripples, right? Like, it ripples and it causes waves, right? And then, well, you can see now while we're recording, we have this stuff happening in the universities. Like, that might spread, right? Like, like if that spirit is strong enough, like, people are going to imitate that, and then we get basically dysfunctional part of society, right? It was already dysfunctional, right? But now it it gets expression, it gets body, right? Like, the spirit that was already there, which was being cultivated for at least since the 60s, if not longer, right? Is is now getting a form, a body, an expression, like it's trying to come to life, right? Like, it's trying to manifest. Like they're refusing the old order, and they're trying to establish a new order. But they're not only trying to establish it on the university, they're trying to establish it in the whole country and in the whole world. So I got really carried away. Um,
It makes sense. It makes sense. The image I'm getting is so I don't know if I can like make a uh anyway. Um so the last verb to cast forth or to reject, as in like the sea after a storm. So there's this like huge storminess happening. There's these waves. So it's sort of violent, and it's this movement in the hidden places. So like as Peugeot says, the sea is hidden. It's we can't really see into it. It's death. It holds all these hidden treasures and things that have died, like shipwrecks and skeletons and buried
or
treasure.
fishes that have a person in their mouth that gets spat on the shores.
Yes, yes, yes. And then afterwards and during it, it sort of like takes all that stuff that's hidden, but it's there and it's been preserved from times past, maybe it's I don't know, but then it kind of throws it out and it throws it onto the land, onto the domain that we as humans, well, not as humans, that we control, that we are sort of in
Well, it's
uh
visible now, right? Like,
yeah.
because that's maybe to go back to what's happening on the universities, right? It becomes visible, right? Like, now it becomes, it's spoken into being, and now we have to relate to it. Like, we have to do something with it. And then our reaction, right? Like, now we're going to manifest patterns. Like, either it's going to be authoritarian, or it's going to be a tolerance of a cancer, right? And that will reliably express itself, right? And then we can look back in history. It's like, okay, like that, like we're like it's come on our shores, right? Like this is the struggle of our times in some sense, right? Or part of the struggle of our time.
Yeah, and the whole thing with it being like spherical and round and like a scroll of parchment, I really want to get into like a geometrical frame of mind and think about like how the river is like this straight thing, and then there's like this spherical, and it's like I don't know. Maybe someday we'll get to that. Um, but
Well, like it's interesting, right? So what is a turtle do? Like I think turtles get pushed on the beach from the waves, right? So like
maybe yeah,
they're literally coming with the waves. So like I think and gravel as well, right? And like what is a curtain rod or a scroll, right? It's it's something that unrolls, but like it's interesting to see, right? Because it's like a wave, but it's written, right? Like there's a text that progressively gets revealed, right? Which means like that's a narrative, right? So with the wave, there's a narrative that's playing out, right? So like I was also making a connection with time, right? Like because a wave is literally a symbol for time because it's something that moves. Uh,
yeah, yeah. It's yeah, and it has to do with like water and like Matthew Pageau's like domain of time and all this sort of stuff. Uh, and the curtain rod and the parchment, um, the scroll thing, that it's like the axis that turns, and while it's turning, it reveals something. So it's not necessarily the thing itself; it's sort of the thing through which it sort of
well,
is
the
revealed.
veil, right? Like
Yeah,
this outer garment, like it's by which things come in. Like I'm also having this image. It's like just imagine that an army comes by sea, and it's like okay, like now we have this army, right? Like it's the wave that, and I think there's plenty of wave references to armies sweeping over countries,
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah,
right? So
yeah.
like that's kind of like a flaw, right? Like it's that which announces itself and that you can't really prevent from coming in.
Yeah, and maybe that also has to do with the exile, that like you have this wave of emigration or something like that. Like we also use that kind of language, a wave of immigrants.
Well, you could go to Noah, right? Like what was his ark? Well, his ark was exile, right? Like he got cast out of his land, like he couldn't stay in his land anymore. I've been thinking because there's been a reference to traders and stuff in the Bible as well, and like what does Noah put in his ark? He doesn't put in valuables. He puts in life or that which gives life. Right. And it's like, okay, like there's a lesson there. Like what do you preserve? You preserve that which is generative. You don't preserve that which is of value. Like the value is by the life sustaining nature of what you're dealing with.
Okay, next word. So debar or devar, this is a very, very primitive word, which means that it's found everywhere, probably top, maybe not top 10, but top 50 words in the Hebrew Bible for sure. And it can mean to speak, to command someone. So like he said would frequently be like debar. Um, but it has like a bit of other meanings. So it can mean either word, it can also mean thing. So like yeah, just a thing. And it also has to do with the wilderness. So like I suspect they're like kind of slightly different roots or something. But then there's this like one group which is to say, to lead, to be a leader. And then there's this other one which has to do with the wilderness and with um yeah, with the desert and with pasturing animals and with bees. I think my favorite part is about the bees and honey is that like it's like to get honey means to take something from the wilderness, which is a connection that Peugeot definitely has made before. That it's like what you get from the wild places, right?
Yeah, well, that connects everything for me. So actually, I had you switched the order of the slides because I had this preceding the last one.
Yeah, I did swap the slides. Yeah.
And I have my notice, but with this slide, that which precedes, right? And in the previous slide, that was the expression, right? So,
Ah.
yeah, like I saw a connection and a sequential connection. Like this goes before the wave. Like you speak, and then things move. Like and what do you relate to when you speak? Well, you relate to the unknown, right? Like to the outside, and you try to put it under your dominion, right? Like that's like, because else you wouldn't have to speak, right? Like you speak because you try to attain something that isn't yours yet, right? Um, and yeah, so like I think, right, like what are the animals, right? Like the animals are outside of the city. Um, they're they're between man and nature, right? Like they're the transitory area between the wild and the cultivated, right? Like there's like I've been starting to read the prophets, and there was this piece about the vineyards being grown with vines, and that you'd have to have cows and sheep trample them. So what is that? That's the wild taking back that which has been cultivated, and then the animals precede man in the retaking of that.
In the retaking, like, what do you mean by precede man?
But they're reclaiming it. Like man can't go there. There's too many vines, too many thorns, right?
Ah, okay.
So nature has claimed that which has been cultivated by man, right? Like first there's this whole thing about vineyards being worth 1,000 silver and stuff, right? So it's like basically that's second paradise, right? Like like you've perfected, and then that doesn't sustain itself, right? Like that's vanity, effectively. Like that's man and his pride, because like he made the vineyard, right? Like he cut out of the stone the terraces and all the things, and then nature takes it back, right? And then man cannot move back into the vineyard, right? They're
Well, vineyards
blocked
are
by the thorn,
also a symbol of luxury because you don't
right?
need vineyards. You just want to get drunk.
Right. It's hubris, right? Like it's that which pride produces, which is also that which Noah built, by the way, like the first thing that he built.
True, true. Yeah, that's a really good
And
image. I
also,
was thinking about
also,
like, yeah.
also a leader, right? Like a leader is also one who precedes.
Mm. But I was also thinking about how it's very appropriate for man to command animals and to be the leader of animals.
Hmm.
So that
Right.
kind of connects it.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because like I just did a bike ride, and they have this thing that they do where they put sheep next to the roads on the dikes because it's like really steep, and they just put them in these containers and they just move them, so they just graze the sides. So they're even utilizing that land, which is crazy, crazy Dutch people. But also, like, yeah, you got to maintain it. So like, why not,
Wait, so
right?
the sheep is basically just being shuffled along in the box?
Yes, and it's amazing, right? Because you lead, but you also don't, right? Like there's only so much that your leadership can do, right? Like they have to graze by themselves. Like so the leading is, and I think that's going back to what I read in the prophet, right? It's like the reading, you lead the sheep to the thorns, and then they have to step on them themselves. Like you can't make the sheep step on the thorns.
Yeah. Um,
And well, if we go all the way, right, like with Christ being the shepherd, or you pass a bit, like you can't make the sheep go into the wild.
exactly. I literally had that same thought, but it also has to do with how uh like there's we're supposed to like clear a path for the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So like the sheep eating away the something is like maybe that's the way it happens, at least in part.
Not like one bite at a time.
One bite at a time. We just want to eat, but it's good that it's like functioning at a high level as well.
Exactly.
Exactly. All right. So this is uh it means language, it means tongue, and those are the main meanings. There's also a tongue of land, so like you could say a peninsula, but that's kind of yeah. I think it mostly has to do with tongue and language, and we had an interesting conversation about language a while back. So I had this fresh in my mind then, but I'm. What thoughts do you have? I have some thoughts.
Oh, my mind goes to snake
Okay.
because they have a very expressive tongue, right? Um, and that makes complete sense with the pronunciation, right? Like the devil's in the details, right? Like there's something there. The sophists, right? That were using language to basically disguise the good. um,
Hmm. Well, but if we go back to the snake, I think for a snake, it's not so significant that snakes have expressive tongues. It's that they have forked tongues.
mhm.
So
Bifurcate.
I think that's like maybe the most significant kind of element for the snake's tongue is that they kind of maybe they talk in dualities, something like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's like snakes. Okay, so maybe this is a bit too scientific for our, oh, maybe not for our symbolic thinking, but snakes, evolutionary speaking, apparently have evolved hissing as a sort of defense mechanism so that other animals can hear them. So they only start hissing when like they kind of detect that someone's nearby, I think. And so it's basically
Hmm.
when you hear snakes speak, it's basically you're not supposed to understand what it's saying. You're just supposed to understand that it's a snake and get away. Like you don't need to know what it's saying. You just need to know that it's it's the snake. That's the problem, not what it's saying, right?
Well, but it probably says go away, right?
Maybe, maybe. So this whole thing for me has a lot to do with the internal part of yourself. So when you're
Mhm.
speaking, that which is internal to you becomes revealed.
Mm.
And it's the same with your tongue. It's like when you speak, your mouth opens and the tongue can be seen. Uh, and the expression, it's sort of the yeah, and it also for me connects with spirit and breath and language, like so language all kind of come together and blood
Well,
because
it's when you speak, right? Like the spirit comes from inside of you and it passes by your tongue, right? And then it gets formed into a shape, which is the tongue. And I'm also thinking of that the tongue is the strongest or like the most diverse muscle. So there's something. Well, that's what the eloquence is pointing to, right? Like there's a power in it, but the power is in the subtlety, not in the strength. So it's feminine in a profound way, right? It's seductive, more so.
Yeah, when men speak, men are like hit rock,
Og smash.
big sword, yeah, grog smash. Women say things I have no idea what they're saying, even though we heard the same words. You know, it's like, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what they think they're saying, but yeah. They speak by not using words. That's what they're doing. They're communicating
Yeah.
a spirit.
Yeah. And so there's this idea that I have about how if you speak the same tongue with someone, there's a possibility of you being unified in a spirit in a way that isn't really possible if you don't have the same language. Um, and that like you can tell what spirit a person is in by the words that they use. Sometimes, frequently, because first of all, you can just tell where they get those words from. Like you can tell when someone listens to a lot of conservative grifters because of the language they use. And it's
Yeah.
like it's a certain spirit, and if they use those words, then you can pretty
You're
reliably tell
talking
that they're in
about
that
dog
spirit.
whistles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, dog whistles, and there's a word for them, shibboleth, in the Bible as well, right? Dog whistles. You can tell.
Well, I would articulate it differently, but yes, like there's a spirit, right, and the spirit will draw on certain words, right, because and like that's how I see spirits, kind of.
Okay.
And like I think we also have to touch on speaking in tongues,
Okay.
right? Because like what is speaking in tongues? Well, like I think it's literally trying to give expression to the spirit. So you're not speaking in language. You're speaking in the expression itself.
So there's a unity between the expression and the origin.
Right, but also, right, like if we go back to the wave, right, like this is a way to I'm gonna say the word channel. I don't want to use the word channel, but I'll use the word channel anyway. To channel the spirit, right? So if you have something inside of you and you have no way to relate to it, because like, how would you know how to relate to it? Then giving it an expression is the right thing to do. You give it a body, you give it a way to unleash its energy that's not destructive, right? Like this is what art therapy is trying to achieve, right? Like it's trying to get these things that grip you, and they're trying to give it a way to self-express on paper, so that it can get out of you, right? And like now you can distance yourself from it, or you can observe yourself to it, right? And like think of singing, which is also maybe related to this, um, like dancing, right? Like these are really direct embodiments, right? Making art is already like really like weird because it's like translated, right? But like when I shiver, right? Like I let go of something. Like there's something in me that's like, ooh, like it shouldn't be here. Like let's get it off. Like, and it works, right? Like it actually works.
Yeah. I think for me the thing that comes in my mind from all of this is what is the fruit of being silent? Because there are monks who take vows of silence for like really long times. So, something to think about. I don't have an answer.
Oh, I was being silent. Also, mute buttons really help. What is the function of being silent? Well, what is being silent, right? When you're not speaking things into existence. Well, like, what does that mean? You make space. You make space for other things to be in existence. Now, you can make space for a person, right? Or you can make space for tension, right? If you want to have peace, you have to have quiet. Because if there's always things, then there's always reaction.
You're not making any waves when you're silent.
Right. And so, like, in order to see into the pond, like the pond has to have no wind, right? No spirit above it, and the mud has to settle, right? Like the mud has to settle, and then you get clarity. But the clarity cannot be without the peace. But so I've been thinking.
And you also can't get reflection unless the water is
Oh, I
quiet.
like that. That's good. I love that.
That's Peugeot as well, of course.
Which narcissist? Whatever. Like, what is he seeing? Because, like, is he seeing a reflection? I don't know. Whatever. So the other part is there's something in the movement, right? Which is different, and like I'm still trying to get a good grasp of that, right? Because at my church we speak in tongues a lot, and we're really expressive, and that's obviously the opposite of silence and contemplation and this quiet. And like I know that I'm, well, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily the quiet type, but I am quiet a lot, right? Like I make a lot of space for things. But there's also something to be said for cultivating or holding the spirit, right? Like that's what zeal is, right? Like when you're zealous or when you're on fire, right? Like when, like, being bold, right? Like you need to cultivate that side too, right? Like this is the argument against women, right? Like women are usually more passive than men, right? So they give more space, but then they don't know how to be assertive, right? Like this assertive part is that which starts moving things, right? Like it brings movement. So there's a bunch of things, right? Like, so there's, well, you're at zero energy, and like, how do you get into a higher energy level, right? Like now you're in a higher energy level. Like, how do you relate to the disorder, right? Like you cannot find peace at the higher energy.
Mm-hmm.
So like you're Peter, you're walking to Christ, and it's a storm. Like, how do you walk on water during a storm? Like, that's a skill that you need to learn too. Like I can't really wrap my head around that yet, but like I think it's really important, and there's some valuable insights there for me.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. It's really good. Okay, so next one. This is again a really big word. Lots of stuff in it, but there's sort of two main, I would say, roots or two main groups of things. So the first one has to do with pasturing, with flocks of sheep or of some other kind of animal, pasture animal, and it has to do, yeah, with leading them, with being a sheep herd, and all these words which are kind of connected around an idea that's really intuitively obvious, kind of David being a sheep herd and all that stuff. And with a flock, and so for example, it also has bishop in it, which makes perfect sense. And then the other idea is around the mind, around thinking, ideas, meaning, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which also, like, I can see a connection, but I'm curious to see what you found, if you found anything.
Well, I don't think I have this one noted down, but
Okay.
I'm thinking back to that which precedes, right? So that which precedes is pointing out. It's pointing out into the wilderness, right? Like I'm just thinking about a trailblazer or something, right? Cuts down the jungle in front of him. Like he proceeds and then things follow behind him. But this is the other direction, right? It is not proceeding into the wilderness or like Moses coming out of Egypt to the promised land, right? Like that's not the type of leadership that's being talked about. Like this is an established union and then looking inward, right? So we can make a connection to the left and the right hand, right? Like where the right hand is engaging, well, chopping down the jungle, and the left hand is tending to the floor, right? Like it goes inward. Like I hope I did those two right correctly. um, and this goes into this idea of tolerance, right? Or like maybe also empathy. But there's these things that are only appropriate on the domain of the left hand, right? Because you're already in a body. And because you're in a body, there's a different set of rules than if you engage with the external world. And if we look at modern times, right, like why do these people, these students in these universities act out? Because they don't feel part of the body anymore. Like,
Something very specific happened in universities this week that I don't know
oh,
about.
you
Or
didn't,
is
you
it?
don't know? Yeah, I guess I should be less cryptic. This is on the internet because this is going to be decontextualized. But no, in the American universities, these people who are trying to have Gaza. Well, they're trying to prevent genocide in Gaza, right? And therefore, they're basically taking over the university, and like they're blocking people from going in, and like they're being really authoritarian in, and like really scary, right? Like cult level creepiness, scary, right? And they're doing this in the name of a spirit, right? And they're refuting the existing authority, right? Like they're saying the country that we're in is so much not okay that we are allowed to upset public order. To I don't even know what they think they're gonna do, right? Like anyway, like they're so far away from being united with the rest of society that they can't persist or can't exist in it, right? Like they either have to perish, right? Like or the body has to change to accommodate them, right? And they're so self-righteous that they think that the body will accommodate, right? But like even if the body had the will to accommodate, it's too big to listen to them, right? Um, and
Okay,
so yeah,
well,
like there's
thanks for explaining, because like I knew universities were crazy. That's nothing new, but that makes sense. I just haven't been keeping up, I guess.
Right, and like, why does this happen? Because of improper, whatever this word is. Because if this word would have been manifested, they would not have had this dissociation from the big part, right? Like
Mm,
because
mm.
they would have been kept inside of the body, and this is what individualism does, right? Like the individualism turns you away from your shepherd, right? Like it makes you rebel. Like it doesn't allow the supervision.
Yeah, I think this has to do with the word has to do with gathering, and it has to do with this movement upwards that you previously described about the bread and the because the way I see it is that the sheep and the cattle are the ones that take the grass and collect the grass into themselves, and then it becomes something greater. And the shepherd does the same thing uh, by collecting the sheep into himself. And you kind of have to give it time, you have to give it space, but eventually it gets transformed. And um, yeah, you can think of it in terms of like head and body, and kind of this movement from the body into the head. But like this word seems very wholesome. It seems very proper, like the proper way of things, good ordering. Because there's probably some other word that describes the same process, but in a disordered way, like in a pathological way.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was gonna say because responsibility is in there, right? Um, what's also dominus, right? Dominion, to take care of your dominion, like that which has been appointed to you. Um, so there's a cultivation too, right? Like there's a way of ordering that which is below you, so that it can gather up into you.
yeah, yeah, and it has to do with mediation because I can't eat grass, and maybe it's not my place to do that. And well, I'm not a bishop, but like bishops have their role as well, and they have different responsibilities from me.
Mm-hmm.
And well, maybe the role of a bishop is sometimes to collect the minds of the people. Uh, and yeah, this like
Well,
I think
it's
I'm kind of
also
making overly like whatever like not observations but associations, but like collective cognition and all of this stuff like kind of moves into it as well for me.
no. Like I think it's like there's a physical part of the shepherding, and then there's a spiritual part of the shepherding, right? Like I was just doing prayers, right? And like I'm doing prayers for the pastor, for the heads of departments, right? For the elders. Like why is that? Like I don't think um, it's been giving proper expression in my church, right? But the principle behind it is that you gather up, right, into these higher places, so that these higher places can rain down back onto the people, right? And like you have to pray for that, like because you have to develop the awareness. It's like, okay, like yes, there's these people above me that have this role. Like I have a relationship to these people. Like I have to enable them in their role, but I also have to enable them acting out onto me, right? So there's two responsibilities that I have, and like you need to shape that into yourself, because else you can't
You need
relate to
to
it.
think like a sheep, but like a good sheep.
Right. Yes, in some sense, yes.
Not
And
a
then
rebellious sheep that runs off into the ditch. That's bad.
right, exactly. And then the other part, like the mind does the same for the body, right? Like
Mm,
the body should take care of the mind, so that the mind can take care of the body. Like, yeah.
yeah, that's good. All right. I really like this word. this is a important one, I think. And Zana, it can mean, like, as an adjective, it means diverse. So sometimes you would say, like, oh, diverse foods or something. Diverse people. I don't know. As a noun, it means a species. But the more interesting part, I think, is that it means also weapons, but it also means like fornication and prostitution, like whoredom. So that for me draws a very clear mind from like um why do I kind of, I mean, I try not, like, not that I try, I'm not in a situation where this happens, but like why would I ever want to, why would I be in the space where I'm, let's say, looking around for like some other like partner? It's like I'm looking for diversity in some sense. I'm not loyal to a single something. And that's synonymous, I think, with like the adultery.
Right, and I like this usually female because like I don't know, like for some sense a reason that resonates to me, right? And it's like well, what's the distinction between male and female adultery? Well, like the male is spreading seed, right? Like like the woman is receiving seed and and having a pregnancy, right? So like what the feminine has to cohere to a man, and like in the prophet part that they were also talking about whores and about, well, maybe not explicitly whores, but and how about 7 women would beg a man to have protection of his name or wear his name or something,
It's
right?
Isaiah 4. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, okay. Is it us? Whatever. And it like I was like, wait, what? like 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 there's a lot there in that verse. But like, why would women want to? Oh yeah, and they would take care of their own clothes and their own food, right? Which is really modern actually, right? Like it's a self-sufficient woman. But then they still want to be under the man. It's like, why do they want to have his name? Well, they want to have the protection of his name, right? And what does that mean? Well, it means that they're gathered under a principle that dictates them, but also shelters them, right? Like we if we go back to the previous slide and we have this leadership quality, right? Like like we need that relationship, right? And like, what is a whore? Well, like a whore has that relationship completely messed up, right? Like she, I mean, like talking about confused, right? Like how confused must the life of a whore be? And then you have this continual fornication, which is like I haven't really thought of whores in that way, but yeah, obviously they have an excessive amount of sex,
Well,
right?
like some of these meanings are like, they're kind of derived from each other, and it kind of has to do with like sex and fornication and stuff. Like fornication by itself is also sinful, right? So
Yeah, but there's something in the like it's it's something that is supposed to be sacred that's being made mundane, right? And that's what I mean with the confused, right? Like it's like the flipping of the up and down.
yeah.
Um,
There's also a word in there that's maybe a little bit hidden, a bit confused because of the formatting of the slide, but there's idolatry. Uh,
oh yeah,
so like idolatry, diversity, it's like the searching for something else. It's like you're opposed to unity, actually. You're acting in opposition, and you're acting in opposition to loyalty, to unity, to faithfulness. Uh, and that's idolatry. That's being a whore. And
So the word that I wrote down on your previous version of the slide is a violation.
because of the weapons
Yeah, also,
as well.
but
Yeah.
but if you're looking at diverse, right? Like diverse is a violation of the principle. Like a species is like the least specific shared category. Like
I
there's
suspect that I suspect that species is in there as like a fairly modern use of the word, but species does mean by itself, from like an old word, it does mean just like you would say species. I think that means diverse, so it's kind of the same in English actually.
yeah, but it's a biological category, right? Like a
Yep.
species is I isn't that like the latest category that you can reproduce?
Not
Like
technically, but more or less.
right. So that's like in some sense you're attending like my mind just goes to postmodernism at this point, right? It's like that like it's the flattening of the world. It's equalizing of everything, right? Like the whore just like she doesn't and so like it's equality doctrine, right? Like that's basically what it is, right? We make everything equal, like and
Yeah, yeah,
that's
that's
what
totally
a
correct.
weapon does, right? Like especially if you look at a gun, right? Like it's called the great equalizer because like everybody with a gun is like yeah, like it doesn't matter who you are, you just have to be able to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I feel like there's something more in the weapons, but I don't see it right now. Maybe
Penetration.
some other day. Maybe some other day. Yeah, maybe for sure. So the next one, it means to buy something, and it also means time. It has to do with time, with seasons, with ages, with eras.
Hmm.
So, what thoughts do you have?
I'm going immediately to Peterson and how culture is a contract with the future.
Okay.
Right. So what do you do? Well, what's money? Like money is future potential crystallized in a material object.
Yeah, I really don't. I feel like that's part of it, probably. But I feel kind of like what a merchant does is that, and when you buy or sell, you are getting something that comes from far away, um, where it's like you get this spatial distance that is traversed, and it's sort of in contrast to the, or maybe not just in contrast, but maybe in parallel with the temporal distance. I'm not
Well,
sure.
it's just well, you can just say distance as such, right? Because like
Yeah.
if I'm a shoemaker, right? Like you don't know how to make shoes, right? So like now there's a distance in specialization, right? Like you gain access to something that's not inherent to you, right? Or like if you're a farmer and I'm living in the city, like I get access to something that I don't have. Like I don't have the capacity to do that.
Do you know what else this has to do with? So I think I think back in the day, people didn't used to go to the shops every day. They would go to market like
Mhm.
once a season, once a year. it's like almost a festival. It's a yearly, annual kind of part of the cycle, and it's a part of the cycle when you get this exchange, when you get this communion with the larger body.
Well, it's also different, right? Because you had traveling merchants, and they just arrived in your village, right? And then it's like, well, you like you have to interact with him before he's gone.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I just thought this was interesting because, like, when I did some translations when I was trying to read something, I thought it had to do with buying and selling, but it turns out it has to do with time. So I was confused.
No, but like I think buying and selling, right? Is like what Christ ransomed himself, and he started a new era.
Mm, yeah. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, I like it. That one is too big for me too. But there's something there with the connection of potential. I think still like
So this next one just has to do with, I think, repentance, and it means turning around, and it has all the meanings of uh it holds all the meanings of turning around, of revolution, of repentance, um,
rebellion. Okay.
rebellion. So like revolution, kind of.
No,
It
no,
also means to
rebellion is different than revolution, right? Like
okay,
revolution is the wheel turning, right? So like that's also what the season is, right?
you're turning
Like the
around.
right,
That's the word. It's
yes, and and so well, there's two turning arounds, right? There's um there's repentance. No, is it repentance? No, there's conversion. No, is it not conversion? Oh man, I keep forgetting the English word, but
this word. This word condenses all of those meanings into into one word. This word
okay.
has repentance. It has conversion. It has perversion, as in like if you pervert something.
Yeah,
It has
that's
just
the
like turning.
opposite direction.
It has inversion. It also means I was going from Riga to Tallinn, and I turned around and I came back. It has that as well in it.
Mhm.
So it's a really condensed word, and it doesn't seem to be moral in the same sense as like the idolatry word did, because that one seemed to be like you should not be doing this. But for this
Right,
word,
right.
it's more of like one of these like metaphysical kind of movements.
Yeah, like I would yeah, like I think the turning around is maybe too literal, right? Because like you could see it like this, right? Like you're moving towards a goal, and then your attention flips, right? Distraction hits, right? So distraction is diversion. It's destroying your purpose. It's allowing for the good, but it's also allowing for evil. All right. And so there's a like the turning away from something is only good is if it's done in service of a higher good, right? So like
Well,
I have
you're changing your telos. You're exchanging your destination.
right, and that can be back, right? Like you can turn around completely, but that's usually a regression, unless you're turning back to the good, right? But like every other turning around that's not to the good is a regression, right? You're turning back to a previous state, which is a negative, like unless you're like jumping off the deep end and you're like, no, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. And then there's this meaning which means to pervert something, as in like to corrupt it, to kind of
Mhm. And that's what
change
the
it.
whore does, right? Like the whore draws your attention and it corrupts it. She corrupts it.
Yeah, and it does say, I think, in Proverbs that uh basically there's this image of you walking down the street, and there's this beautiful lady in the doorway. It's like it
Looks nice,
distracts
right?
you.
It
Yeah,
looks
it does.
nice.
Does.
If
Yeah.
only.
But no, you're supposed to run away from her. Stay away. Yeah. Okay. So this is a yeah, amar. This is another word that has a lot of meaning in it, a lot of Christ associated meaning, a lot of Genesis meaning. To say something, like this is also top 20 words in the Bible. To say something. So when God said, this is the word. It means lamb.
Mhm.
So the Lamb of God is actually the same as the Word of God.
Really?
Yes.
In the Old Testament?
Well, I'm not sure if it ever says the Lamb of God in the Old Testament. I'm not sure.
Right, right.
Maybe.
Like, I don't know why you're making this connection with lamb. Like, I get it's in the Bible, right? But like, that part is not in.
Not in the Old Testament, but this is the
The,
language that the Jews spoken in the first century.
yeah, but like, why would they have the connection to the lamb? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, because Christ is the Lamb of God that
Yeah, but
carries the
that's
sins of the
only
world.
after Christ. Like, I get that they made that connection at a certain point, but like, it's not a set. Like that's like if you wanna have one of the most surprising things in the Bible is like, wait, the Lamb is God. Like that idea. Like I had this guy. Jesus was really provocative. I'm like, yeah, but also no. But like the Lamb of God sitting on the throne, that is provocative, right? Like I don't know if Christ did that while he was alive, because that seems like a thing that happened post mortem, but also really provocative.
Well, I think it condenses again a lot of different Christ associated meanings into one. Like a lot of meanings that were associated for me before, and then you read this and the word has all the stuff. So, um, like Christ is, the word that was in the beginning with God
Mhm.
from the Gospel of John. Then there's also Christ being the Lamb of God. Then there's God creating the world by speaking and saying. So in Genesis 1, I'm pretty sure this is the most common word that there even is.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and there's probably something else I'm missing. But yeah, I just think it's cool. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
Right.
the note that I had was the head of a body,
Hmm.
right? Like it's definitely the
Are
principle.
you sure that's for this slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like what is a prince? Like the prince is the first, like it's the head. The commander is the head.
Well, he's also he who speaks. He's
Right.
the commander.
Um, preacher is the voice, right? Like vocalizing. Well, maybe it's like the expression of the head. It's not actually the head, right? Because that would be the
Yep.
prince. Because like the prince is the representation of the king on in his kingdom. Um, so if we're going to make that Christ being second to the Father in that sense.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so yeah, like maybe that's fair, right? Like because like if you well, a command is also like it's one step removed from the king himself, right? Um, so maybe the head is not but it's the mouth.
Yep. It's like one step below. Okay, so this one's also quite good. it has to do with fruit. So actually, lamb. Like, there's another word for lamb, and it's
I
the
think you
same as
just put
fruit.
lamb everywhere, and then we have universal meaning.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So this word has to do with like just being fruitful, with multiplying, with increase, um, and I don't know. I think this connects most to like the sacrifice of the first fruits. Coincidentally, Jonathan Peugeot and Richard Rowland just did a video on that, which I'll confess I need to rewatch because it was just that good. Um, but there's this sacrifice of the the kind of most valuable. I'm not sure whether the first fruits are the most valuable part or whether they're just the first. Whether they're sort of an indicator of things to come, or maybe it's
Well,
a
it's the
thing where like,
firstborn,
yeah,
right? Like that which hold the next generation, right? Like they're signifiers of that which follows, right? And like that's what I had on this slide. That what follows, which is also the tail, by the way, right? But
mm,
but like the wave is that which precedes, right? And this is what follows, right? Like follow me and everything shall be added on to you. Well, this is what's being added.
yeah, and makes me think about like the Garden of Eden, paradise, and like the fruit trees in there, um, and like the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, all that kind of stuff. Like it's way too high up for me, but there's connections that could be made, I think, for sure.
Yeah, but that tree doesn't have their fruit. It has God's fruit, literally. The knowledge
Okay.
of because that's what the serpent said. You will be like gods, right? Like you're eating the fruit of gods. Like that's not your fruit.
Yeah. It's a yeah.
I
Yep.
have to read
You're
that
right.
again too.
So this is again one of those really, really, really huge words. And I would say like the first meaning is son. So just the son of man.
Bruh.
Um,
Hey, bro.
hey bro. Yeah, bro. And it has to do with creation, with creating things, especially with like high level creation, with like God created the heavens and the earth. And it also has to do with like wild places, with uncultivated and thorns and uncivilized and outer distant things.
Hmm.
Seems pretty intuitive to me, to be honest.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, it's a sort of primal, wild, um, initial state of things at creation. So I would contrast this with the soil of Adam. That like, or maybe not contrast it with Adam so much, maybe contrast it more with the garden. That the garden is the place that is civilized. It
Hmm.
is developed, cultivated, fruitful, whereas the Bara, the open country, is like it still needs to be cultivated. It isn't there yet.
So I'm thinking about what do you send into the world? Your son, right? Like who's the hero? Your son, right? So like what is like this is also what the prince is, right? Like what is your interface with that which is outside of your dominion? Your son. What do you send to earth? Your son. Like and like what does the son do, right? Like he starts the heavenly kingdom. Like that's literally what he does. So like it's like an extension of yourself that is making dominion, right? It's cultivating that which is uncultivated. And that's what creation is in a profound sense, right? Like that's the speaking into existence in Genesis 1, right? Like which is also the word, which is his son, right? so so you can also see that that which you speak is your child, right? And so what did I have? Well, I had a potential seed cultivatable. Like you're spreading seed, and you're allowing things to grow. Um, so it's also the heavenly impregnating the earthly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I view this definitely as a sort of lots of space but not much value in it. And actually it kind of has negative value because it's you've got to remove all the stuff. You've got to clear the land first. Um, and I also view this in terms of like the three-tier structure of the camp, that in the middle there's the tabernacle, and then there's the camp, and then there's the outside place. And in the outside you have, if I remember correctly, you pretty much just have well, you're not really supposed to go there very much, and if you do, it's kind of like to work.
Or
But
being
that's where,
unclean if you're unclean.
yeah, yep, that's where you get sent out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a death sentence, potentially, even
Potentially,
likely.
but it's also where Christ finds himself in some sense, right? He resists the devil,
Yep.
right? So yes, that's where the devil is, right? Like that's where you can fall prey to wild animals. Like that's where all the danger is, but also all the good things,
Yeah. That's where you find the honey. Honey.
right? Or
Yeah.
it comes from, right?
Yeah. So this is, I think, one of our final words. The meanings in here are getting a little bit less significant. Are, it just means earth. And like the opposite of heaven, like this is the other kind of earth. And the verb has to do with like something happening, basically. It's like the moment where something manifests into existence, like a potential manifests into something. And I think I link this just straight to um like Peugeot, that
I mean, you
something
can just link
happens.
it to English. R, like R
Oh,
is being, right? Like it's you are this, like
yeah, 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 yep, yep,
like it's the assignment of identity, right? And like you said, the word manifest. That's the one I wrote down. It's like yeah, the manifestation of something. But
yeah,
like this is where I'm getting a little bit because that like earth, right, or matter, right, is that which can be manifest, right? Like so there's like again we have this strange thing, right? So I think maybe we should get Peugeot's image where he has this nested thing, right? So you have the thing and then you have the circle where the two sides meet, and like I think this is talking about the top side and the bottom side of that circle where the two things meet, and so maybe this is in the camp, right? This is not in the outskirts, like this is in the identity already. Like I like the city better because like you have the city with the suburb and then the countryside. Like it's in the suburb, right? Like it's in that which uh, breeds with with the external, right? Like it's not isolated. Like like a cell, right? Like it has the nucleus, and it has that in which things happen, and then it has the external with the periphery that's malleable, right? Like, and like the nucleus has a different boundary that I assume is less malleable or differently malleable, at least.
Exactly. Good biology. Love it. So yeah, emad, it means to baptize, and it kind of also means to wash something, to dive into water. I think the I think those meanings are really clear. The one that I found peculiar for some reason is like a column or pillar.
Mhm.
Do you have any
Which
thoughts
is
on
the
that?
pillar of fire of in Exodus,
Oh, yeah, yeah, I guess.
right? And what is a column, right? Like a column holds something up, right? It's also that which connects to the foundation. Um,
Yeah, that brings up something that may not be relevant, but it's something I've been thinking about how there's this heaven and earth thing, and like man is supposed to, let's say, like connect them and like bring one together with the other. But there seems to be this trope or like mythological thing of there is like a essential necessity that there is somebody who holds up the heaven from the earth, separates them.
oh,
So
you
there's
mean
this,
Atlas?
yes, and there's also like a Egyptian one, and there's a bunch of them, but there's
Oh,
like
really?
somebody who keeps them apart actually,
Hmm.
and maybe that also has to do with like the firmament that God creates.
Yes, yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
so I
So,
wonder whether
so
that
I
links
like I
to
read
baptism
I
somehow.
I read that is like a bad translation, but but what what did I read? It was about that which makes space, right? So if you separate, you have to have something that holds the separation, right?
Mm.
Because how else is it separate? Mind blown. uh, but then also, right? Like then there's also a mediation at the same time, right? Because if if you, well, like you have a pillar in your house, right? Like it separates the roof from the floor, right? But it also mediates, right? Like if something happens on the roof, like it reverberates that down, right? Or the other way around, right? And so now that's also analogous to the role that humans play, right? Like that's the bridge.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny how like you kind of implied that Atlas is a god of the gaps of like a traditional cosmology. How like, oh, the heavens and earth are separated. Why? Well, there must be somebody holding them up.
Yeah, but that like he has to hold them up, right? Because else they'll fall down. And like, well, maybe that's also related to the veil, right? Like because like if we see the face of God, then no, please, right? Like we're not ready. Like it will burn us. Like there's this distance has a good side too, right? And I think when we're talking about this, is like how does that traversion happen, right? Because like the word that I wrote down is submerge, right? Like so. Um, how do you learn how to swim? Well, you get submerged into water and you get exposed, right? But the way that you get exposed is by voluntarily engaging that, right? Like it's not the flood. Because if you get submerged in the flood, you don't have the dry land to return to, right? But it's also in some sense directional, right? It's downward from heaven to earth, not upward, right? And maybe this has to do with the asymmetry, right? Because like like earth gets informed by heaven, like there's a way in which, right, through the smoke or we shall be like the stars, right, where we can participate in heaven as well, but that only happens after a fulfillment, right? Well, this is related to birth, right, to cleanliness, to making penetration is that which happens before the seed, right? Right. Well, that makes total sense, right? Like having plant seeds on earth, right? It's like, well, like then there's an action that needs to happen, right? Like, so I'm a little bit confused that the sexual, well, penetrate is somewhat, but like the sexual part
Yeah,
is
you
more,
need to be a
well, the pillar,
delicate with
right? The
language.
column. Sometimes the meteor. What do you mean you need to? Oh, you chose to leave that out? Is that it?
No, no, no. I just mean that like the sexual symbolism is frequent, but there's delicacy involved.
Okay. I'm too rough. Is that what you're
No, no,
implying?
no, no, no.
Like
I'm just
I
joking.
dove right in. I plunged. Like I set myself onto it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I gotta wash that one off. Okay. Enough jokes.
Okay. So the W is like it can also be like a O, so it's roch or roch, something like that. It kind of has to do with all these spiritual and wind things. So like the wind of God, the breath of God, the spirit of God, kind of the same word. Also has to do with smell and space, spacious, things like that. Also ghost.
Yeah.
So lots of connections that I think this is a fairly, let's say, like well-known word that like, oh, the breath means the wind, which means the spirit. So it's probably not that surprising, but are there any connections that come up for you?
Oh, so first of all, I see at my notes, and like my notes ended at this word, and I didn't have anything said about this word. But when I look at it, right, like connecting it to what we just talked about, this is where you need the peace, right? Like this is where you need the still pond. And I think this is what the space is talking about, right? Like you need to create the space to see, to observe. Like you don't notice you're breathing unless you're like hyperventilating or whatever, right? Unless you attend to it. And like what did they say in meditation? Focus on the breath. So like what is the breath? What it's waves. Wave in, wave up. Like it's like the beach. Coming in, coming up. And every breath in, you take something in of the world, right? Like you take in spirit. And then with your exhale, you express, you exhume. You well, exhume, well, whatever. There's a leaving of the body of toxic chemicals that will suffocate you if they build up.
And also, when you exhale, it smells like you.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, or some disease, yes. Um,
No, but like I think that matters is that we can't really help but spread our spirit into the world. Like it's kind of a necessary part of life is this
mhm.
catalysis of like undifferentiated spirit into our spirit. Or maybe not undifferentiated, but like the atmospheric one, the environmental one from the one that we're in. We kind of personalize it just by being in that area. And it's just a part of life. It's necessary for living.
Right,
And
correct.
yeah, no, I just
Well, I'm more looking to the other side, right? Like I'm also now thinking of the sun rising and the sun going down. Like it's this cyclical nature, right? In, out, in, out. But what is it that we're breathing in? What is the spirits that we're breathing in? What do we get possessed by? Because we are breathing in spirits from our environment. And it's like, well, like you choose what you eat, right? Like there's dietary rules everywhere in the Bible. But what about what you breathe in?
yeah, there's no breathing rules.
Because you can't control it. And I think maybe there might be a couple, like around unclean people or something. But like breathing rules are weird, right? Because like you can fast your food. Can you fast your breathing? No, not really. So it's like a different function. It's like your heartbeat, right? Like it's this eternal. Well, it's connected to life, right? Like it's this life giving, but also weird things giving, right? Like you might get hit by a smell and feel disgusted, or you might get hit by a smell and you get a nostalgic experience. And it's also overwhelming in some sense. Like it's inviting things without our knowledge. It's like one of the gates that's just open. And then right, like you can be more or less resistant, right? Because we were having the word with the distraction, right, or the turning around, or like like does your breath participate in your telos, or does it bring in new telos? And then we have ADD, right? Like what is ADD? Well, you just take in, take in. You're just getting directed by what you take in.
Yeah. Right. Right. Good stuff.
That was it.
So, hmm?
That was it. We're done.
Wait, is this the last slide?
Oh, this is the light slide. Okay.
Is it?
I don't know. I
No,
haven't.
there's one more actually.
Okay.
Wait, no. Yeah. So this kind of just means gathering. So when you gather stuff, like God gathering the waters, this is the verb that is used. But the more interesting meaning, I think, is the noun, which means synagogue or church. So there's not really much distinction between like a gathering of people and a religious thing. Also very, very bourgeois, the gathering of the things underneath something creates a larger body. This has to do with that.
Well, it says dropsy. I don't know what that is, and death.
Oh, it's a sickness of some kind. I don't know exactly. It's an old-fashioned word.
Okay, but that's like the opposite, right? Like,
Well, maybe that's like a very marginal meaning, but maybe if you see something in it, then
well, now I'm gonna look up the crazy word dropsy because like time to do that. Adema, okay. Fluid retention, build up. Okay,
that makes sense as well, right?
right. So okay, does that so that would be that, right? Like if you partake of too much,
Mm.
which would be greed. Like if you assemble too many things, or gluttony.
If you don't want to let it go, because with fluids, like the body rejects fluids quite easily. I think usually, unless you're sick. Sometimes,
Yeah, but still unhealthy. But yeah.
yeah. Um, yep,
So things that I see here is higher identity.
yeah. Just collection of things together. I think higher identity, yes, but the body of the higher identity. It's like you're looking at the substituents of like the parts of the larger thing. You're looking at the unity. Um, you're looking at the diversity of the unity, not the unity itself. Sort of.
Well,
So
okay,
you're
I would actually describe it differently. So the way that I see it is what it is, right? Like what is sweeping or something, right? Like sweeping is the process, right? So what are you doing? Well, there's something, right? Like so, this is the higher identity. This
mhm,
is the constituents, and there's a mediation between the constituents and the higher identity that draws them in. And I think that the drawing in is what we're talking about.
yeah,
Because like that which gathers or collects or summons, right? Like summons is even more explicit. It's like I call on you, right? Like I call you in.
yeah. It just seems pretty standard kind of Peugeot
And now
thinking
I'm
language.
thinking of the king that invites the guests and they don't come. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that has to do with like how um the king invites people, and there does seem to be a place for something like individual agency in showing up. Like it's not a forced gathering.
Well, the point is that he is above all the people on the street, right? They show up, but he's not above the nobility. Like the nobility is worshiping something else,
Oh,
which is
yeah,
which
and
is what's happening now. By the way,
yes, that is true. But also, I think maybe it's that like the people on the street don't have anything else. It's like
well, okay, whatever. Like this is where I'm like getting a bit annoyed. It's like yes, maybe they don't have something that gathers them in, but they still adhere to the thing that gathers them in. So like I don't even think that's a negative, right? Like I
no,
literally think
I don't either.
I like because like if we're talking about the split tongue, right? Like what is the split tongue? Well, there's it it's appealing to two higher things.
It's equality.
No, not necessarily, right? Like it's division, right? Like oh my one eye is on this and my other eye is on that, right? And now I get dragged apart. which makes it satan. Like it's dragging me apart, but it's also dragging me away from the king, which is dragging the kingdom apart. Which like it's all destructive. Because now, right, like, well, like I can show up, not show up once, right, but now, like, the second time not showing up is going to be, right, like this is the slippery slope thing.
And why aren't you showing up? Do you have something more important to do?
Well, the second time I might not, right, like the first time I might actually have it, but like if there's no consequence I might just do it again.
Yeah,
Like
maybe
that's
you have
that
to look
that's
at
what happened
a
with
field or the
university.
cow or something.
Well, that's what happened with university for me. So I go to university, I go to the classes, and at a certain point, for whatever reason, I don't, and then like it becomes easier and easier to stop attending classes because it's like it doesn't matter. Like nobody gives a hoot whether you're there or not, or like it did. Like my grades didn't even give too much of a hoot. It's like anyway.
Alright. Last word, and this is a fairly simple one, but important. It means head. It means the top of something. It means the beginning, and it also means sort of the like the best, the first of something. So the first word in the Bible in Hebrew is bereshit. That means like in the reshit, which is from this, and it means in the beginning, but it kind of also means at the top of it, at the head, and this definitely has to do with like the leader or the chief of something. And all of those concepts are again just collapsed into this one word. So they're all like synonymous in some structural, metaphysical way.
Yeah, but it's interesting, right? Because like the prince is also first, but it's a different first.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. So the prince is like the first from the top, whereas this is the top.
Right.
I think if you read the Bible with this in mind, you'll like see stuff differently.
Probably. But that's the father's son, right? It's like like God the Father is in some sense not involved, right? Like because he doesn't speak himself, like he gets spoken for effectively. Like he does speak because the prophets hear him, but like I don't yeah, like it's a weird like well, and you have Moses and Aaron, right? So you have Moses as the head and Aaron as the prince. And the prince speaks for Aaron, like for Moses, because Moses can't speak.
Yeah.
Uh, And and so like I think there's something really important. Like Trump should shut up. No. Biden should shut up. No, but um, wow, how is this so appropriate?
Is Biden in the room with us right now?
No, but like they're just messing things up, right? They should have other people speak for them, like for real.
I see your point now. I was confused.
Like 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 you know how much misery there is in the world because these two people speak. They should just let the water be a reflection. Okay. Yeah, so like when we're saying first and best, right? Like I don't know, like this is what I'm associating more with the firstborn than the other one actually. And like like we remind the head by putting it first, right? Like when you eat, you serve the most important person first. You put the most important person at the head of the table.
Yeah, I think that is true. I think for me this collapses or collects the various different ways of emanation from a principle into the outer parts, into the manifestation. So that like there can be a temporal thing, which would be like the beginning. And then there's also like a physical structural thing, which is like the top. And then there's this other sort of different hierarchy, which is, there's the king and then there's the subject, which you can
No,
kind of see how
it's
it's
origin,
linked.
right? Like
Yeah, it's
it's
the
the
origin.
origin, or the other word, arche, right?
Yep. And like all of those different meanings get pulled together with this. And I can see how all those different like dimensions or all those different expressions of this meaning kind of they express themselves, they manifest in parallel.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So well, like because like the prince is also sometimes the authority, because I'm writing an article and I'm editing it, and I'm gonna release it today. Sorry, YouTube, but you should have already read it. Um, but it's about authority, right? And I'm making this distinction between the idea that authors and the embodiment by the author of the story, right? And the author is driven by the idea. And so the idea is a standard that judges what the author writes. And that's how you can make corrections. So the actual authority is the idea, right? And the author is just a mouthpiece, an expression, right? Like that would be analogous to the prince. Like or Aaron, like he's first on earth to articulate or relate that which is ineffable. So when God speaks, right, like someone has to prophesize that, right? Like has to speak for God.
But I feel like the ineffable source of something is, it's beyond this rish, beyond the head. It's like it's invisible, but this is the first point of the contact point with reality.
Right, but fair enough, right? Yes, I agree, right? So there's like it's not actually God. The head is not God, right? Like it's the spirit that Christ prays to, right? But okay, like let's do it between you and me, right? Is like what is the closest that you can get to me? Like it's what goes on in my head or whatever, right? Or like what my head is expressing, my facial, like my emotions, right? Like like a tinfoil hat. But but like you can't get closer than that, right? Like there's more of me than my head, right? But like how do you get access to that?
all of that stuff will be somewhere well, sort of hidden behind the manifestation.
Hmm.
So like the
Well,
further you manifest, the more of that I can see, but the further you manifest, the more layers I kind of need to scrape back to get behind it. And that's kind of
but no, but there's a different way that you can know me, right? Like, so you know me by my head, but you also know me by the waves that I make, right? And the waves that I make are a consequence of my participation, right? So now there's like when I say words to you, right? Like I'm directly communicating my will to you. But when I act, you see my fruits in essence, right? Like you see my tail. um, and so that's knowing me in a different way, right? Like you could say, well, I can make you a proposition, right? I can propose to you to dance, and I can dance with you. But what is me dancing? Or like you never get to know me dancing by me talking to you about it, right? Like I can show you propositions day and night. No, you have to truly know me, right? And so this is the expression in time of me knowing that um, that is not in the head, but it's in the fulfillment of me participating. But like that's the fulfillment part, right? Like the participation only gets known by fulfillment. Bam, insight. I need to write things down.
connection, integration.
So,
Right. I think we're
chief.
at the end of this.
Yeah, we have achieved it. You were worried that it was going to be short, but it wasn't. Um,
It definitely wasn't.
I hope that this is useful to people. I think we can do like an announcement uh, of our plans. We want to have a European resource time slot where we do live streams. We gather um, under the banner of Europe, and we
Gather
start a
all, gather
Europe,
all, gather all.
and we will start a European Union. Um,
Europe and
um,
Africa, same time zones.
oh yeah, we will accept Africans as long as they don't migrate. That's funny. But more seriously, yeah, no, you're welcome to join. I think we want to, yeah, start bearing some fruits and get to know each other by dancing instead of eating propositions. Do you have a reflection? You said you have more energy, so
My reflection, yeah, my I think I can just conclude that I need to read the Bible more. I'm sorry.
more propositions. No, you don't need to read the Bible more. You need to live. You need to know things. You need to dance with them. That's what you need.
Okay.
You need to dance with the bees and get some honey.
Yes, yes, that's I need to like not experiment, but get a taste of
Experience.
experience. Yes, get an experience, get a taste of the experience of all this stuff. Because realistically, I won't become a full-time beekeeper, but I can meet some bees, and I can maybe have one beehive for a year or two and see how that goes. Stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, no, like this is really useful for me. Like it's just like my brain goes into these. Well, I call them frames, right? Like it's just like, and it's massaging everything. Is like sieving things out, and like it's just like this is a category. This is a category. This is a category. And like I hope that I can start applying these categories on things that I encounter, right? Because like that's where we all have to want to go, right? Like well, why do you like why do you want the honey or whatever, right? Like well you do want to taste the honey, right? Like you do want to appreciate it, like and you appreciate it by having these categories, right? And then having the spirit move through them, because that's where the glory is, right? Like how these categories combine, like they separate but they join, and then they move around, and and when you can be with that, right, like in the moment, he's like, oh yeah, like this is things condensing into meat and then rising up as smoke and scent, right? Like when you start seeing that, it's like, oh, right, like now I know what's happening. Right, like now I can see what's going on, and then all these crazy things that people do start making sense, because they're all acting out the same patterns, but they're acting out the patterns wrongly, right? Because they're not relating to the proper categories, and like you said, right, like or like I said, when you breathe in and breathe out, and you don't have the categories to sieve what's coming into you, right? Like what, like to recognize, to discern the spirits, like it's in the Bible, right? The gift of discerning of spirit. If you don't have the gift of discerning of spirits, you don't know what takes hold of you. And yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, comment. Um, but let me know what you think of all this, and I hope this live stream will be coming to you at home soon. Like and subscribe.